Hey, Solobach here. As most of you know, I've developed an interest in Myers-Briggs personality types this year, and in fact, it's pretty much been my latest obsession over the last several months. But unlike most of my previous obsessions, this one actually has direct applications to my life. And because of that, I've thought a lot about how these personality types apply to my existing core beliefs and values, namely my faith in Jesus Christ. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about how being an ISTP relates to my Christian faith and lifestyle. Now, I've seen a few threads in the ISTP forum on Personality Cafe talking about religious beliefs, and I've noticed that most ISTPs don't identify with any religion and generally aren't interested in any established religion or having any sort of religious faith. And that doesn't surprise me at all. Because if you think about it, we ISTPs with our lead introverted thinking, supported by extroverted sensing, are naturally inclined toward thinking for ourselves and focusing on real-world tangible facts. We tend to be independent and adaptable to our circumstances, which lends toward a sort of, I've thought this through and I know what's best for me mentality. So it makes sense that a lot of ISTPs just wouldn't be interested in having a faith in God or any sort of unseen higher power. And I suspect that a lot of ISTPs who are raised in Christian homes later walk away from their faith once they start questioning their own beliefs, especially if they were raised by SJ parents who provided no more reason to be a Christian other than, this is just what we believe, or because the Bible says so. Now, I actually did not grow up in a Christian home. I came to faith in Jesus Christ during high school. For now, I won't go into the details of how I came to accept Jesus. Maybe I'll do that in another video. But being a thinker, I did question a lot of aspects of Christianity, both before and after I gave my life to Christ. And I sought out logical reasons to believe that Christianity was true. And thanks to some excellent Christian apologists, I found a lot of answers that reaffirmed my beliefs. But I'll be honest and say that living the Christian lifestyle that I've committed to has often been a struggle for me as an ISTP. For one thing, just being an introvert means I prefer to be alone more than I want to be around people. So that makes it kind of a chore to obey a lot of the things that Jesus commanded, like love your neighbor as yourself, or let your light shine before men, or go and make disciples of all nations. Or later when Paul writes, let us not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing.
Some, as in introverts like me?
And these are just a few of many examples throughout the Bible that show the importance of connecting with people. And so naturally the church encourages it, and so they plan all these social activities, some of which have just the sole purpose of just bringing the church members together and allowing us to connect. And for most of them, it's like a foreign concept that I just might prefer not to attend such activities. Now, of course, I do attend some of them, but I do it more so out of a conscious decision to lay my own desires aside and just to do what I think is best for the body of Christ and for my own spiritual health. You know, I do realize it's bad to spend all of my time alone, so I try to force myself to stay connected with people, both inside and outside the church. And then there's the sensor aspect of the ISTP personality. Now, we sensors like to take things literally and focus on concrete facts that we can observe. And that makes Christianity kind of a hard sell if I'm trying to convince another thinking sensor that reality consists of more than just the matter and energy that we can observe in the universe. In order to believe in God, you kind of have to consider something that transcends all of that, and ask how everything in this universe came to be. And a sensor won't just automatically go, oh, well, all this complexity in nature, it must have been designed by an intelligent being. Even though I now understand that that's a logical conclusion. In fact, the verse that comes to mind is Romans 1:20. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. So the Bible is telling us that that there's enough that we can observe in nature to point us to God's existence. So we can't just go, oh, well, I'm a sensor. I didn't see it. It just means we have to rely on intuition, which sensors do have, but we just don't have an innate preference for it.
I think the book of Revelation is like a censored worst nightmare.
Now, there's also the thinker aspect. And this is really significant because introverted thinking is the ISTP's dominant function. And I'll get to the cognitive functions in a bit. Now, thinking is certainly a valuable trait that any Christian can use for God's glory. But because thinking is such a strong preference over feeling for an ISTP, it can cause just as much of a struggle as introversion for the ISTP to show love to his fellow brothers and sisters. Jesus told us that the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and then to love your neighbor as yourself. So how does being a logical thinker help with that? Well, it doesn't, at least not directly. But you just have to keep in mind that God didn't take away our ability to feel. He still commands us to love, which means He certainly gave us the ability. It's just that it's a bit outside of the ISTP's comfort zone. And that's just another reason why Christianity might not be naturally appealing to a non-Christian ISTP. And finally, there's the perceiver aspect of the ISTP. Now remember that when you're talking about perceiving versus judging, judging does not mean judgmental, which is something that Christians often get a bad rap for. But judging just means that you prefer to make goal-oriented decisions and plan ahead and organize your tasks, while perceiving means you prefer to leave things open-ended and be more go with the flow and take advantage of opportunities that come along. Now with those definitions alone, neither preference really sounds more Christian than the other, but they do generate stereotyped traits, where the judging types are seen as more responsible because they plan ahead and are always on time. They keep their place neat and tidy, while perceivers are seen as more irresponsible, unreliable, unproductive, never on time, and always messy. Now, that doesn't mean that all perceivers really are that way, but they can be, and, well, let's suppose you are. I'll admit these are some of my weaknesses, as you can see. But what incentive do I really have to improve myself? Well, for one thing, I could be a more effective servant of Christ if I could be more dependent on to get things done. But the thing is, perceiving traits can be used effectively for God, but the thing is, that desire to serve God has to be my motivation to grow in these areas. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep living for myself. Now, I just used the Myers-Briggs 4 dichotomies to describe the struggles of being an ISTP Christian. But now I'm going to talk about how I believe God has gifted the ISTP in specific ways that can be broken down by the Jungian cognitive functions. After all, God designed every aspect of every person, of every personality type, and He gifted each of us in different ways for different purposes. All Carl Jung did was invent a system of 8 functions to categorize and observe the different ways that people perceive and process the world around them, which, as far as I'm concerned, is just a way to interpret that aspect of God's design of humanity. So for the ISTP personality type, the 4 conscious functions are introverted thinking, extroverted sensing, introverted intuition, and extroverted feeling. So first we've got the ISTP's dominant function, TI, or introverted thinking. And that's where I'm processing all this information in my head and organizing it into a strictly logical fashion, coming to my own conclusions on what's true based on the information I gathered through my own research, figuring out questions like, does God exist? Was Jesus Christ the Son of God as He claimed? Is the Bible reliable? What are the chances that everything we observe in nature came about by random chance? Or was it created by some conscious being? Now, others may disagree, but the knowledge that I've come across over the years supports my belief in God the Creator and Jesus Christ His Son, in whom we find salvation.
Next, we've got the auxiliary function SE, or extroverted sensing. This is the function that allows me to take in the details of my environment. When I'm out and about, I like to observe the beauty and wonder of God's creation. Like when I go on a road trip or a hike, I like to take in everything I see around me, whether that's mountains or the ocean or a variety of trees or cloud formations or a sunset. Just appreciating the beauty and the complexity of God's craftsmanship in everything in nature.
And then there's the tertiary function, NI, or introverted intuition. Now, as a tertiary function, this is often used in conjunction with the first two functions, and is often not really understood. In fact, I've heard some NI DOMs say they don't understand it. But I realize that God may sometimes speak to me through this function. It could be just a simple gut feeling that gets my attention, makes me suddenly aware of a pattern in what I'm observing, or a truth about someone that I'm supposed to act on. Maybe there's a need that I'm supposed to pray for, or a person that I need to reach out to and, just have the right words to say. It's strange the way God works, but using my NI in this way, I'm able to trust in what God is doing.
And finally, we have the inferior function, FE, or extroverted feeling. Now, as an inferior function, FE is usually not very well developed in most ISTPs, but for me, just having it allows me to be aware of and consider other people's needs in the things that I do, just as the Bible instructs us to. Now, I may not be much into giving warm hugs or being all smiley and mushy around people, but I do see the importance in things like offering prayer support when needed, or serving other people, giving my time, or just forming connections with people when I otherwise would have nothing to gain. It's just part of the whole
love your neighbor as yourself thing. So despite the personality traits that might make an ISTP more prone to rejecting Christianity, there are obviously some unique ways that ISTPs can use those traits to glorify God. Because after all, God made us this way for a reason. And whatever type you are, even if most people are unaware of the different personality types and may not understand why you think the way you do, you're not using your gifts to their full potential if you just try to be like some other members of your church who are gifted in different ways than you. It's like 1 Corinthians 12 says, "The body is a unit, though it is made up of many parts. And though all its parts are many, they form one body." And then to put a spin on another verse in that chapter, the ISTP cannot say to the ENFJ, "I don't need you." And the ESFP cannot say to the INTJ, "I don't need you." But in fact, God has arranged the parts in the body just as He wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? So if you are a Christian, then I hope that this video has encouraged you somehow to embrace the personality type that God has created you to be, and to appreciate the other types in your life. And if you're not a Christian, I hope that this has at least given you a glimpse into what being an ISTP Christian means to me. Thanks for watching, and God bless.